It's a new week of Tea with a Shepherd, and this week we're diving into James is a perfect continuation of having read Hebrews, and we're going to pick up a lot of the themes that we read in Hebrews as we carry on through this book. Now, this book was written by James, the brother of Jesus, and James did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah at first. In fact, it wasn't until the death and resurrection of Christ that he actually believed, and we see both of these. To understand the picture of both of these, you can find in John 7:5 is where it shows that he did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And then if you read in 1 Corinthians 15:7, you'll see that this is where he was converted. So, and I look forward to sharing with you tomorrow. This tea is absolutely delicious and it's cozy and warm. It's just all the things perfect as we're studying in our scriptures. So be sure you're tuned in to the Shop and Made page to see the release. And then tomorrow morning, I'll make mention of what this tea is. But you can take it as, because it has to do with one of the romance stories of the Bible as we are on that storyline. So, on that theme. So now, let's read now in James chapter 1, verse 1. And I'm going to break these up into a lot of little parts this week. I'm probably only going to stay in chapter 1 because my Bible is covered with notes. James is packed and there's so much to talk about. So we're probably going to have to only do at least James 1 for 1 week, and we'll see how the other ones go. But this one is definitely going to be a lot of little parts broken up. So let's read. James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Now, he is addressing the 12 tribes. These are to the Jews, to the Hebrews, but understanding that Christians are children of Abraham. We are engrafted in. So those who put their faith in Jesus Christ are a part of this body, this audience that he's talking to, because we have come into that inheritance that Christ has given for Abraham's children. And as Abraham's children of faith, we are included in that. That's what it means to be engrafted in. In verse 2, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Okay, so James does not say here if you face trials. He says when you face trials. So it's going to happen. There is no wonderings. If you're facing trials, it's set in concrete. You're going to face trials. That's life. He doesn't appeal for some sort of adoption of superficial gaiety in the middle of your pain and your trials or in the middle of your life's adversities. Instead, he's focusing on the fact that there's candid awareness that this happens, that there is trials that come, but you already have truth that's known. And so this is how you're going to stand. You're going to persevere through it all because of the trust and the faith that you already have. Now, as he's getting into this, he starts off first in this first section to see that he is, before we can care for others, because he's going to talk about that too, before we can care for others, we have to check ourselves spiritually. We have to make sure that we are in a good place, and this is one of the ways you do this. Understand you're going to go through trials, but persevere through them. Don't let it destroy you. Don't end up falling back because you haven't persevered. I was actually just sharing this with our teen class today in Sunday school that when before Peter was called, he was a fisherman. That was his livelihood. And so, of course, he became fisher of men with Jesus as he began that journey with him and being discipled with Christ. But at the end, not the end of his life, but towards the end of Jesus' ministry on earth, of course, Jesus is crucified, and Peter denies Christ. And he struggles with this afterwards. We see that he goes and mourns after the cock crows. He's just torn up about this. Well, then Jesus is resurrected, and we see Peter still very much wrestling with what he did. If you had betrayed who you knew as the Messiah, and you betrayed somebody who's your best friend, they've come back to life, you would have a hard time looking them in the eyes. It would be very painful knowing what you have done, and it would hurt the relationship. And this is how Peter felt. So Peter didn't feel comfortable around Jesus because of that sin that he had committed, and he didn't know how to deal with it. So what does he do? He goes back to what was comfortable to him, what he knew in the beginning. He went back to the livelihood of fishing, and he went fishing again, and that's where Jesus finds him. And so Jesus calls him out of the water onto the shore, and he prepares breakfast. He might have even prepared the breakfast from the fish that they caught. But he sits down and he begins to help Peter work through the pain and the hurt that he was dealing with, the guilt of everything. Sometimes when we go through trials, that's what we do. We feel like we have to escape back to a time where we were doing something we knew and that we could control. And that's what Peter was doing. He was trying to go back to a place that he could control because he was feeling out of control. And he felt inadequate. He felt he had hurt somebody that he truly, deeply loved. So let me go to a place that I can kind of process through this. And that's why he goes fishing. So, but God had already called him out of that. Now, it didn't mean that you can't use the livelihood and the skill sets that God has given you and not use it all. No, that's not. In fact, Jesus even tells him when he's struggling with paying taxes, what does Jesus tell him to do? Go fishing. So these things and these skills that God has given us is not to be just forgotten. He does build upon those. But why Peter went back to that was because he wasn't able to persevere through this trial he was going through with having denied Christ. So when we go through these trials, whether it's sin-induced or if it's because of just the enemy attack, this is what he's saying: consider it pure joy whenever you face these trials of many kinds, because you know it'll test your faith. And that tested Peter's faith. Again, we go back to what we've learned about faith. Faith is the revelation, persuasion to do God's will. So all of that took place with Peter, it was testing his faith. Are you sure? Do you know without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus is the Messiah? Even when he got to the point of the trial that he was starting to say things that he didn't mean, but he realized that he wasn't acting upon his faith in the right way. So he had to sharpen that faith so that later on when he is actually killed for his faith, he doesn't even want to be crucified the way Jesus was. He says he's not worthy, and he is actually crucified upside down on a cross. So his perseverance, this testing that he went through, yes, it was painful. Yes, he didn't know how to process it. And yes, he went back to something that was familiar, but he still learned how to persevere, and it sharpened his faith to be able to, in the end of his life, stand strong in that total conviction of the revelation of who God was and the persuasion that he was going to follow him to the end. And so as you're persevering, you finish that work so that you become mature and complete. Somebody who runs a race, as we've talked about even in Hebrews, somebody who's training for a race, they're going to keep pushing themselves and go into the next level and pushing themselves again to the next challenge and the next challenge. You strengthen the lungs, you strengthen the legs, you strengthen the muscles, you train your body to respond a certain way, but you're building it on each other over and over and over. So that way when you get to the day of the race, you're able to race and finish your course. You're not just doing these little pieces here and there. You have put everything together over time because you've been working at this. And now you're mature and complete to finish the course, to finish the race. You're not lacking anything because you've built up muscles, you've built up your lungs, you've built up your mindset to be able to push through the walls. You've built up all these things to now you're mature and complete to complete the race. So that is what this looks like, is perseverance. You're going to persevere through every trial, and it's going to stretch your faith and stretch your faith and stretch your faith so that you will complete the race. God doesn't throw everything in life and all these trials all at one time and not having trained you before you get to that point. You've been in the training process for a while so that you can persevere. And it's also the picture of persevering even in marriage, because when you think about the first year in marriage, for a lot of couples, it is very hard. You're trying to adjust. You're having to learn each other, how each other think, who keeps the toilet paper on this side and who keeps it on the other side, and how do you roll up your toothpaste. And all these little things sometimes get annoying, but you learn each other's quirks, you learn each other's way of thinking. And that first year can be pretty bumpy as you're getting to know each other. but you persevere. And then you get to a point where the marriage is doing pretty good, and then you hit what they call the 7-year wall. And there's a struggle. Almost every couple goes through, normally around that 7th year of marriage, where you start really getting irritated with each other. You're angry with each other. You're going against each other, and you're trying to figure out what on earth is going on. Well, but when you persevere through it, then you begin to, again, see the beauty of how you are united and how God uses our differences to actually make us stronger. And so this is all this picture is. We sharpen each other. You sharpen your faith as you're going through the trials, and every bit of it makes you a better person and builds your character. Okay, so I thought I was going to get to the next part, but I didn't. So we will pick up tomorrow and talk a little bit more about the doubt that James picks up in verse 5.